just talk about something that struck me, because we had been talking about Brother Bill last week, and just reminded me of something that he said. He said, you know, it's funny, no one ever likes to read the book of Ecclesiastes. He said, I really like that book. And I said, oh, okay. He said, I know it seems kind of depressing, but it really isn't. And I looked at it for a while and I said, you know, he's right. It might sound a little depressing when you look at the book of Ecclesiastes, which is probably why we try to skip it all the time when we're reading. And then I realized that there is an important lesson within there. And the lesson really is on how to be content. And it sounds very strange because in this day and age, it doesn't seem like there's a lot to be content about. And before I go any further, I'm content that my uncle is actually here. Because some of you might have realized that he was in the hospital. And I'll be very honest, it's a miracle that he's actually here. And I think he knows that because he's shaking his head. And if you know his history, you'll know why he's shaking his head. But I just want to thank God that he's here today. I actually want to be thankful that everyone is here today, because we're in that kind of era where anything could happen to anybody. It's a real uncertain time that we live in, and it's very easy to look for the solution to our uncertainty and our discontent in everything but Jesus Christ. So I was looking at the book of Ecclesiastes, and in the first chapter, in the 16th verse, it says, I said to myself, look, I have increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I have experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly, but I learned that this, too, is a chasing after the wind. That's for all the people that want to get multiple degrees or spend a lot of time on Wikipedia. We spend a lot of time reading books, trying to figure out what's going on in the world. He goes on, for with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. This is obviously not for your children who are in school, because they'll come up with a reason not to actually study. But the reality is, it's true. Sometimes the more that we learn, we sometimes want to go back and go, I wish I didn't know all this. He goes on to figure out, because he figured knowledge and wisdom weren't the key to this. So maybe there was another way. Maybe it was in the physical pleasures. I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself up with wine and embracing my folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. Have you ever met that kind of a person? Everything's party. Party. Every weekend, party. But even that, after a while, gets old, doesn't it? Some of us were expecting to have those wonderful New Year's Eve parties, and that kind of fell apart, didn't it? And you start to reevaluate. What is this about? What is life really about? Is it about partying? Is it about studying? Is it about building things? Because he goes on in the second chapter, verse 4, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. Some of us, that's what we get into. I'll just build something. That'll be my legacy. It's funny because you walk around this area of Brooklyn, and I lived here for a lot of years, and I realized that sometimes I'm lost in the old neighborhood that I was in because half the things that I remember are no longer there. They're torn down. Somebody had built something else. It's one of those things that all the efforts that you put into it, and then you realize in the end that your kids always hated your house and they sold it. Or they ripped it down to the ground. Or someone else did. So maybe that wasn't the answer, building things. Maybe it was just becoming wealthy. Materialism. He goes on in the 2nd chapter, verse 7, I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself, and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers, and a harem as well. The delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all of my toil. Interesting. You know what the reward was? Nothing. Because in chapter 1, verse 14, I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and indeed all is vanity and grasping for wind. This is a man that had it all. You would say that he was actually wealthier than all the wealthy men of today. Really can't calculate the wealth that Solomon had. You know, we look at people like Bill Gates, and we look at Jeff Bezos, and some of these other people that are extremely wealthy. This man just wasn't extremely wealthy. He had it all. Wisdom, knowledge, wealth, power, all the things that in this world we think are going to make us content. We think that somehow that's going to make us somebody. That's how it's going to happen. And now we're at that time of the year where we all get this surge of, I'm going to be somebody. I'm going to buy a new calendar. I'm going to put up a vision board. I'm going to have my goals laid out. I'm sure that happened in 2020 also, by the way, and things changed. But the reality is that's what we do. We have our New Year's resolutions. Things are going to be different this year. Somehow, we're going to find that contentment in something that we do, something that we accomplish, something that we own. Have you ever noticed you buy a brand new car? Then after a while, it's like, not the same anymore. Doesn't have the new car smell. It's not as nice and shiny as it is when you first got it. But you come to a realization that the car functions just the way it always did. But it lost some of the glimmer when you first rolled it out of that lot. Or that new house loses a little bit of that wonderful feeling when the boiler breaks down, or the roof starts to leak, or it just becomes kind of messy and you go, man, I wish I was in somebody else's house. Have you ever noticed we're never content with anything? We have a job, I gotta go to work on Monday. We don't have a job, I don't have a job. Then you get a job, I gotta go work on Monday. We're never happy. We never seem to be happy with anything. And don't get me wrong, God's not against anybody having goals or dreams or any kind of ideas of grandeur. Were it not for God, Solomon would not be able to have all this wisdom and all this pleasure and all this wealth. But he realized something that maybe we don't realize so much.